Awesome. Welcome to How to Make It in Toronto. And I'm here with Mr. Howard Freedman again, who's got a great story for us for our edition of Story Time. So I'm going to hand it over to Howard, who's going to share a little bit more.
Oh, I'm delighted to be back again. Thank you, Carl. Toronto, it means so much to me. When I was a child, the only places we would go on vacation during the summer was to Toronto because my grandmother lived there and grandfather. And to me, as a little boy, I looked at Toronto as being, a whole different country, and the people there were so different, and it was so nice and so friendly. And during that period in the U.S., there was a lot of race riots and things like that, and it was pretty terrible. But when you got to Canada, I mean, everybody was so nice. You didn't see the race riots. You didn't see anything terrible. They're just nice people. And I started going there probably when I was 8 years old. I loved being with my family because as compared to today, we didn't have iPhones and you really had to talk to your family in person.
Yeah.
And no matter how poor they were, because they worked in the garment industry, there was always food on the table, always food, and probably too much food. And when I got to Canada as a little boy, my grandmother would, after I gave her a hug and kiss, she'd pinch my cheeks and she said, "Oh, you're so skinny, we're going to have to fatten you up." And she would go and call the grocer because she didn't drive, and she would order Pepsi and Danish pastries and all this stuff that probably in later life gave me diabetes and a heart attack because you were always eating. And through the years, I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved being with them because we were treated as royalty. My grandma's family was very wealthy. They owned a meatpacking plant, and they were like, "Wow, this is rich." I go over there. They had a maid that shined my shoes, and I said, "Wow, this is really nice." And one summer they gave me a job, or 2 summers working in a meatpacking plant, and my job was after the butchers would, butcher the meat. I was at the end, and I had to take all the bones and put them in barrels. So that was my job. One barrel went to Campbell Soup Company, and the other went to the glue factory. But I did that all day, like a white, coveralls. And then when I came home at night, my grandmother made me put all my clothes on the porch because it attracted flies. So, I had to take a good shower. I smelled terrible, but, and I made all of like $200 for the summer.
Wow.
And, but the nice part about it is my mother's family was very wealthy, and they would sneak me money. Like, here's $100. Don't tell anybody. Put in your pocket. You use it for college. So I had all this money in secret that was put in my pocket for college, and I did use it for college because I thought that was the thing to do. And I looked at it as, I was a good little boy. I watched black and white TV. The highlights of our trip, and it kind of started out years ago when my parents would drive from Massachusetts to Toronto on the New York Turnpike, and we'd stop at all these, like, I won't say terrible place, but souvenir places. And there's really nothing you could buy there unless you wanted a wallet or an ashtray or something. And my mother was always the type, we got to bring something back for the family. What should we get? So we spent half our vacation bringing back ashtrays, which don't use anymore, wallets that they wouldn't use, candy that wasn't really good for you. And my mother also loved bone china. So when we went to Toronto, she collected bone china, which sadly we have in our home, but nobody really wants it. Beautiful bone china.
Yeah.
And there was one I didn't drink, but there's one type of liquor called Crown Royal. And the only place you could get it was in Canada. So where we went, my dad had a list of people who wanted Crown Royal, and it came in a nice velvet bag. As far as entertainment, the things that I remember, Casa Loma, that was like really the place to go. And we took all kinds of pictures of Casa Loma. That was the place. The CN Tower wasn't quite built at that time, and we never got there in the right time to see the Canadian exhibition. We kind of talked about it, but I never went there. And we'd also go shopping. I was reading the other day that one of the stores was Hudson Bay Company. Then I was reading I was probably going to go out of business. So that was the store. We went there. We went to Loblaws, if they're still around. And my grandmother lived in this apartment. And I don't know if the laws have changed, but it had a crosswalk. And the whole thing was that in the middle of speeding traffic, you could cross the street. And all we heard was cars screeching, probably people knocked 50 feet from the sidewalk. Because there were no lights, it was just a crosswalk. You're going to stop at the crosswalk. So that made a lot of noise. But I think one thing that is very memorable to me, not as a child, but as an adult, was I was in the military reserves in the U.S., and we had a 2-week deployment at a place called Camp Drum, New York. And I hated every second of it. I just didn't like, wearing my boots and stuff like that. But, something I had to do. So one weekend in between, the drill sergeant said, we're giving you guys the weekend off. Go where you want. You can leave Friday, come back, make sure you're here Monday morning. So all the guys were all going to New York City and having a good time. And I thought to myself, I want to visit my grandmother. Now, my grandmother also lost her vision. She was blind. And so anyhow, and nobody knew where I was going. Nobody in my family knew that I was going to do this. So I got in the bus, ended up in Buffalo, which was not a very, very nice city. And I took my money, I think I had like 10 or 20 bucks, and I rolled it like a cigarette and I sewed it into my undershirt because I thought if somebody would jump me, nobody was going to steal my undershirt. Maybe they'll steal the money, but they're not going to steal my undershirt. So here I was. I got to a place, again, I don't know if it's still in existence, called Yorkville. And
I live.
So the bus pulls up in Yorkville at 2:00 in the morning. 2:00 in the morning. I said to myself, what am I going to do? And they said, I said, my grandma lives off of Bathurst Street. I said, oh, that's a very, 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 very long street. So I said, I'm going to walk down Bathurst Street, which I thought, maybe was a few blocks. I started walking. Then I stopped. If I heard footsteps, I went in the alleyway. Walking. The blisters on my toe. Walking. I was waiting. I was looking in the sky looking for the sun to come up, but it didn't. I said, walking. And, am I getting closer? What am I going to do? What happens if somebody kills me? Nobody knows in Toronto visiting my grandma. So, walking. About 6:00, the sun was coming out, but it was probably a good 5 miles from where my grandmother was. Oh, and I was hungry, man. I was just so hungry. You know, I didn't know what to get. So I stopped in this delicatessen, you know, ate probably the worst possible food I could eat, you know, with not cooked very well, but it filled my tummy. And I didn't have a cell phone, a way to call her, so there was no way of communicating. So I kept walking, walking, walking. The blisters got bigger. I was in great pain, walking, walking, walking. And it's like 6 o'clock, and then 7 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock. I said, you know, I think I'm getting close to her place. So I finally got there, finally. And I pray, thank you, God, for making this happen, for not being murdered on the way to visit my grandmother. So I knocked on the door, and again, she couldn't see. She said, who is it? And I said, oh, it's Howard. I said, Howard. So she comes in, you know, it was like the best feeling. So, oh, you got so skinny again. Here I am. I'm not so skinny again, but she thought I was skinny. So then she said, well, I'm going to call one of your aunts, second aunts, and we're going to go over for breakfast with grandma. I just had breakfast. No, 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 I insist. You're going to have, you know, potato pancakes. I said, Grandma, I'm full. I don't, nope, you have to have potato pancakes. So we went over there. I went to my aunt's. She gave me a pinch and she said, oh, so skinny, so skinny. And I sat down, and she didn't speak English very well. I'm going to make you some potato pancakes. And I said, oh, I'm really full. And she gives me a stack of potato pancakes. I said, I'm really full. No, eat. You got to eat these. So I had them to my mouth and I said, I'm really full. No, you're not full. Let me make you another batch. So, blah, blah, blah. So I was uh, so bloated, let's put it that way. On potato pancakes, walking 10, 15 miles. But it was truly, truly one of the best experiences in my life. And it kind of showed you, as now I have grandchildren, the importance of family, the importance of family. And all the people I'm talking about are gone now, but it was like better than Disney to me, because I just love these people so much. It was like a deep love. And before we were ready to get home, I would start crying. I said, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And it taught me the importance of family. I still think of my grandma, and I still think of this incident, but it's just something I think about Toronto that's very, very special to me, in terms of the memories, in terms of the people that really had a good impact on my life. You know, we used to laugh. We go from family to family. And people, one of the aunts that made the potato pancakes, they were really poor. I mean, they didn't have a lot of money. My uncle was a presser. You know, he pressed clothes. And he probably made like $20 a week. I mean, back then.
Yeah.
But they always had the potato pancakes. It was always a potato can. And then, you know, we'd go out and have, I don't know if it's still in business, chopsies, hot dogs.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't give away tickets to Toronto Maple Leafs. I think it was a Toronto Maple Leafs ball team.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to go to the games. You know, the stadium was empty. But it was fun to go, and they would give things out because they wanted to entice people, especially those hot dogs, which were good hot dogs. And then we on the way home, it was kind of funny because her family, being in the meatpacking business, would send us a kind of care package of meat and dry ice. Okay, so we get this big box and all kinds of meat and stuff. So my dad got nervous So we put it in the trunk and we covered it with a blanket because we didn't want to get stopped by the immigration department.
Yeah.
And they would say, I was sitting in the back seat. My father started sweating. He said, okay, if they ask us something, don't volunteer information that we're importing meat to the Canadian meat in the U.S. because it was like really good stuff.
Yeah.
Good salami, good, everything was like really good. So I felt like part of the Bonnie and Clyde gang when we were trying to cross the border to get into the U.S. importing meat from Canada. So we would come home. Like I said, I had a bunch of bills in my pocket for college, which I did put away. We had a bunch of meat. My mother had her bone china. There weren't too many people that liked the souvenirs. There's only so many ashtrays you can get. And we'd stop at these places. They were Native American trading posts. And that's where they have that stuff, cedar pencils, wallets, tomahawks. I mean, you couldn't bring anybody home a tomahawk. I mean, what are they going to do with the tomahawk? But that was like the first thing we did. We spent half the vacation. What am I going to bring back for so and so and whatever? So it was fun. And then we used to driving up. Sometimes it did take 2 days. We'd stop like at Santa's Village. We stopped at Niagara Falls, which was quite beautiful. It was hard to readjust to the speed limit because everything was in kilometers here. Mileage. So, you get on the highway, it says 100. Wow, it's like on the Autobahn. So, no, that's not 100 miles per hour. 100 kilometers. And, you pick up certain words, Canadian words, like people say A and schedule or whatever. And just a few little words. So I can always tell somebody that's, from Canada, but the memories, I think, of the transit system was immaculate, really immaculate, compared to the Boston subway station. The food was good. There was something that they made at the bakery. They called it farfel, and it was like really good. There was a place called the Health Bakery, and they made that. And I wish as an adult that I could share these same things with my grandkids, but the generation now, and it's just the way it is communication is more remote. It's not real. It's not real. You can't hug and kiss somebody like I did my grandmother, and it was kind of sad because again, she had type 1 diabetes. She lost her vision. It was sad, but I held her arm. I helped her, and my mother used to come and bring, because my grandmother liked half sour pickles. So my mother would get this big jar of half sour pickles and would bring candy and stuff. So it wasn't materialistic, but I think it was just a true gift. I think when you can kind of compare a beautiful city like Toronto, you see people from all walks of life there, a lot more probably ethnic communities than you would see here. But I felt very safe there, walking all those miles, which was really crazy. I could have taken my $10 and taken a taxi, but I was determined. I think, if you set a goal and you're determined to say, oh, this is one of the greatest things that I can do, is visit my blind grandmother and surprise her and make her so happy. And it was worth it. It really was worth it. And, to this day, I still love my grandmother. I love the family and how good they were to us. We used to go to nice restaurants and things. And those are memories that you can't really forget.
Yeah. How long was the trip from Massachusetts to Toronto? Like, how long did that take you usually?
Well, it depended. You know, the last times we went when we were older, um, probably 10 hours. But when we got older, my dad would get, better cars with air conditioning. And I took my soon to be wife. And the only problem going to Toronto is my dad smoked cigars and then my mother smoked cigarettes. So when we were sitting in the back seat, we were choking. Here it is. We got 10 hours. And then, oh, Dad, open up the window, the cigar. And he would just ignore me, and he'd just take out another one. My mother would hold her cigarette up. I'm getting a little bit lightheaded, but we're only 400 miles from Toronto. It won't be bad, but I don't know if I could take it. And then the windows were locked, so I couldn't open the windows. So it's like they're killing us with the smoke and all that. So I think of those things. We can laugh at them now. We really can because it's just so good. But Toronto is one of my very favorite cities, only because of the memories. And after my wife and I were married, we went back there and had a wonderful time. But I felt something was missing because the family wasn't there. It wasn't. I tracked down one family member, and that was it. But you can't recreate it, but you keep it as something that you keep tucked away. And you said, I wanted to be good to other people because my family was good to me. And that's really where I learned, being generous to some degree, being knowing what it's like to feel important. We didn't really know. My sister told me, she said, they were really nice to you, but after you left, it was the same as every other family. They would argue and complain about one. But when you were there, they were on their best behavior, really. So I just think I appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. If you're lucky enough to live in Toronto, you're lucky. It's just a beautiful place to be. I was always impressed with the city hall, how modern it was. Even back then, I just was impressed with a lot of things, and I would take a lot of pictures. And unfortunately, a lot of pictures you would take, you'd have to bring to the drugstore to develop. They didn't all come out, but we have a few. And as they say, if you've gone to Disney from Kodak, it's you're always making memories, and these are beautiful memories.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful story, and definitely shines a light on Toronto. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share that and the importance of the message of the opportunity to be with family and spending and having great memories with family, and how important that is. And connecting that to the city, it was phenomenal to hear that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. I think that's going to be a great highlight to our interview. Touch note for the greatness of the city of Toronto. I really appreciate that, Howard.
Yeah, and thank you, and it's all from the heart, and then everything I told you was not made up; it was a reality. But sometimes I take out pictures and I look at them and I say, those were really good times. I was lucky, and I don't look at lucky as being materialistic lucky. It's just the love, and you can't really put a price on love and respect from my family, good behavior, though it was boring as hell. But it was just a love and respect, and I was sad to leave it. I really was, but I'm happy now as old to embrace those beautiful memories of Toronto.
Yeah, at least say people always remember how you make them feel, right? So I'm seeing that Toronto meant something to you, quite truly.
It did. It still does.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll come up and visit us soon, and we can do a walk around Toronto soon.
I'd love that. That'd be wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Howard.
You're
And,
welcome.